Hi everyone, welcome to the Life of Education podcast. Hi. So today we're here with Sebastien Aguilar, and you are the chairman and the founder of Simply FI.
That's right, yeah.
You're also an engineer by nature, and you have a master's in engineering, is that correct? Yeah. So one of the reasons that we wanted to bring you on today is that we had obviously Andrew Hallam and we have Steve Cronin on the podcast, and we were talking a lot about becoming financially independent with fitness professionals and with everybody in general. And we wanted to bring you here to talk about, well, what happens after you become financially independent? So maybe before we start, you can tell everybody about your background and who you are and how you got here and how you got to creating Simply FI, which really was from 0 to 2,500 members.
Thanks Carly, thanks Keith, thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure.
It's an honor, really. I haven't had the chance to talk about any of this with many people yet, so thanks for the invite. We started Simplify a few years ago, simply because there was a massive gap in the UAE around financial education, especially for expats, and we noticed that there was a lot of people falling into the traps of savings plans sold by advisors, and so that was the trigger. It all started because I signed up on one of those, and so I invested with them for a while, made a massive loss, $20,000.
Oh, really?
Right when the market was going up massively. 20,000 as opposed to compared to what I would have had if I had invested the simple way that we're doing now and that we're promoting with the group. So that's for me, that's the cost of learning. But
that's a huge cost.
Yeah.
I listened to you. You were one of the guest speakers recently at Unwind the Grind, and I was listening to your story and about you explaining to everybody about losing that much money. It's a lot of money, particularly when you convert it into dirhams. It's almost 100,000 dirhams just to lose like that from a plan that you assume is going to help you save and assume is going to do the opposite of what it does, and then to come out of that with a huge loss. Yeah. How did you deal with that?
It wasn't that bad, actually, because by the time I pulled out of the plan, I had already started the other one, my own way of investing, which we call DIY, and we follow an approach called the Bogleheads approach, which is fairly known in the US, but that needs more awareness about outside. And it's really it's simple and it's effective, and it helps you invest very easily. And Steve and Andrew told you all about this, so I guess for those who want to know more, go back to those episodes. Once my plan, my own DIY was on the way, I realized that even if I had lost, I was gonna be making so much better with my own plan. And those 20,000 is really what I paid the financial industry, right? For not knowing. And it took me some time. It took me a year to realize how bad it was, and then it took me another year to really pull out of it and let go, because there was this fear of loss, obviously.
I wanted to ask you, what was the moment where you realized, oh, this isn't working? What was that trigger for you? Did you meet somebody who explained it to you? Were you reading a lot about it? What was that?
So it's a combination of doing research around index investing and passive investing, and realizing that costs matter, and then diving deep into those savings plan, realizing how much the fees were. And the fees are hidden, they're difficult to understand, and although here and there you could see it's 1% management fee, overall in total it amounts to 4 to 6% in most cases. And that makes a huge difference over the lifetime of someone who invests, say, $10,000 a year. Let's imagine that's for 40 years. Over that period of time, it can make a difference between having a certain amount of money and 4 times that amount. So that's the importance of those fees, and that's something most people don't realize, right? So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay.
So you were researching a lot at the time,
Yeah.
and you kind of figured that this wasn't going to work for you. So then you flipped over to DY investing,
Yeah.
and you've been doing that. So I heard you discuss you've been doing that for 7 years now, right?
Yeah, a little less, 6 years.
Okay.
Because it took me a while to start.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now you're financially independent?
That's right, yeah.
Amazing. How does that feel?
Good, yeah.
Well, obviously it's been a journey,
Yeah,
so it's...
yeah.
You know that you're heading in that direction. 7 years is, to be honest with you, it's actually not a lot of time. How did you do that?
So it's a combination of what I call growing the gap, which is increasing earnings and reducing expenses, so increasing the savings, and then this knowledge about investing, which is pretty straightforward. So you really need to know how to invest, and then the other side is how to build a life that suits your needs, and really understand what the value is of everything you actually spend money on, and weight that against that future freedom that you may have one day. And for me, as I progressed, basically initially my first forecasts were telling me I need to work for 25 years, right? So that's when I first realized that I could do this. And then as you progress, you realize that you're actually doing better than the forecast, but also that there's things that you value less than that actual freedom from having to do exactly what your boss is telling you to do on a daily basis.
That's what I want to get to.
And then gradually, you just make that forecast better, or you get closer faster, essentially. So once you're on the trip, or once you're on that journey, it goes faster than expected.
It snowballs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the first motivation way back before you started saving? Like what were you trying to achieve at the very beginning? Why would somebody bother wanting to do a small investment plan to build for the future?
Initially was what triggered all this is obviously I'm an expat, and I came over here and there's no pension plan. And I was looking at ways of contributing back in my home country, which is Belgium, and the options were limited and I wasn't too happy with them. So started saving for my pension. So forecasting things until I'm 65. And that's when I realized, well, the more I save, the more I will have at 65. And there was a point where it was just, I'd have millions and millions. I was like, I don't need millions and millions, so I can probably stop earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So my first calculations showed me that I had, I didn't have to work for the last 10 years of that working life. So 55 was my first estimate. And then it came down gradually. Yeah. But it was the pension, really, the lack of security, really, that was that triggered all this.
Yeah. So then once you start saving and you see the money, what are you thinking? You think you're going to retire earlier? Are you thinking you're going to travel the world? Are you thinking...
Yeah. It was mostly deciding how much I had to save as a minimum to get to a number that I'm comfortable with at 65. And then, at first the idea was that the rest could be spent. And I was lucky enough that I was earning okay, and I had a simple life that I didn't... Actually, I was saving a bit more than what I really needed to get there.
Yeah.
And so the discussion was what to do with the remainder. And I just put it in as well.
Are you still working nowadays in your job?
I don't have a paid job.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I've heard that you recently you resigned from your role.
Yeah.
You're working in the energy industry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I worked as a consultant in energy management, and I stopped 4 months ago now.
Do you mind me asking how old you are?
33.
33.
Yeah.
And is that you retired?
I don't know if I can call it retirement. It's financial independence.
Yeah. But it's not only that, it's also now I'm not working.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't have to.
Sebastian, that number, like you're 33, that's amazing. Congratulations. Honestly, it's amazing.
Yeah, there's a bit of luck in all this as well. But no, it is young. It is young compared
to It's very
to
young.
What we see.
So, okay. So now if everybody, obviously these are things that everybody wants to aspire to. Everybody doesn't want to have that looming, like, oh, I have to work until I'm like 70 or until I'm 65 because I have to. So what's the point of all of it? Why do people want to be financially independent aside from like the stress off your shoulders?
So I think stress is a big thing. In the consulting industry, there can be a lot of stress. So that's definitely a motivation to say, well, if I get to that point, I don't have to stress about all of this anymore. And although if most of the time when you are in the industry, you work as if that was the best thing you could do with your time and energy, and the best way you could contribute to a better world or to do something good with your life. There's typically other things you would want to do instead.
What kind of things was it that you wanted to do?
Right. So the motivation can be basically having, the freedom not to have to stress every day, but also I think having more choices. And that can go from traveling with your family or taking care of people around you, family or a baby boy. We're having a baby soon.
You're having a baby?
Yeah.
Congrats.
And so it's perfect timing that basically we will be there to spend, time all the time that we need to with him in his early years. And there's no stress about having to go back to work. There's other kind of stress, not like stress disappears. But it gives options. It gives me options. It gives me the right to decide what I do with my time.
Yeah.
And which whether it's paid or not is sort of irrelevant now. And so that's the biggest difference. People can't really buy my time that easily anymore.
Yeah.
Because I don't really need the money.
Yeah.
That's the key. That's the key difference.
So then how are you spending your time then? What are you going to do now for fulfillment moving forward? Because the Simply FI, that's simply financial independence. That's what that stands for?
Yes.
And that's a Facebook group.
It's a community.
Yeah.
Around the Facebook group, because that's where it's most active. It's just a group of volunteers like me or Steve, and we have a few team members there in the organization team. And we're just there to help. And we run
educate.
Meetups. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we educate via meetups. We give presentations on all of these aspects of investing, but financial independence and other sides of personal finance. And then we encourage people to help each other, and we welcome people to share their own experience. So it's not only us sharing our knowledge or experience. Mm-hmm. It's also bringing in people from outside to talk about how to do this better and why to do it. Right. So, so Steve and Andrew are excellent at talking about this. I think I've been speaking about investing for a while now, and I'm happy to speak about the next step, which is why are we doing this?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the purpose?
Exactly. What's the deeper meaning behind it all?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's that for you?
I think it's really taking back control over my own life first, but also then helping my family, being there for others, and it's being able to disconnect from that concept that I need to get paid to do something. So it's kind of a big life hack, because you disconnect yourself from that capitalist way of telling people what to do because they're getting paid for it.
Yeah.
Right.
So instead you're choosing to do the things that you enjoy and the things that bring fulfillment into your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So it does trigger big questions, because as you get closer, the big question is, okay, what am I going to do next? And there's no one to tell me what to do anymore. So I need to decide myself. All of a sudden, you are fully responsible for what you do with your time. You can't just say, well, that's my job, or I'm sorry, I can't be there because I'm going to be at work. No, I'm sorry, I can't be there because I've chosen to do something else. All the decisions become much more intentional. It in a way, it puts pressure on you to think through things more carefully. It forces you to ask yourself some of the most important questions, I would say, which is, all right, what am I doing on this planet, and what am I going to do with all this? Well, with my energy, with my time, with my life.
Now that I don't have to be in the rat race all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't really have that excuse that a lot of people, well, I think while you're in the rat race, you can make intentional choices, right? And we can talk about that a bit later. But once you've decided that you're not part of that anymore, then you have no choice but to ask those questions and try to find answers. And that's typically looking at, okay, what brings me fulfillment? What keeps me going? Is it a passion? Is it, am I happy just sitting on my couch and watching TV all day? And that could be the answer for some people, right? So it's not like there's no perfect answer. You don't have to go and save the world all of a sudden. Although that's maybe what I'm looking at now, because I think it comes with the big being in this situation brings also comes
a bit of responsibility I'm getting from you. Yeah,
and that's maybe how I see it. But it doesn't have to be like that. I know people who are financially independent and just go around and have fun, and that's fine. That's totally okay, right?
So what do you feel is the responsibility that you want to take part in? Is this continuing to educate people about financial independence?
There's quite a few options. And just to come back to the options, it's really if you get to that position early enough and you've been able to do what you've done, there's a part of me that's telling me I could pick to really go and do anything because I have time and I think I can learn still. So deciding exactly what that's going to be, it doesn't have to be based on what I've been doing so far. Obviously, that's an easier way, right? Saying, well, I've been building this group. I could choose to just go into that full time, expand it to the limit, help as many people as I can in that specific area. But that would be helping the rich get richer, which is a little strange because at the same time it's helping a lot of common people, just freeing their own time to maybe do better things. So there's a bit of that. But I could also decide to go back and take a PhD in something really important that will help, save the world or
you already have two master's degrees, don't you?
But so what? That's just the past, right? It's kind of looking forward. The options are almost infinite. So it's finding what matches me, or finding what matters most to me, and then where there would be a good personal fit. That's the big question right now. Yeah.
So earlier, before we started the podcast, you and I were talking about this graph that you had sent me, and it was basically it's almost like a needs hierarchy, and we were discussing the need to have housing and the need to have safety and to have security. So can you go through that with everybody and what that looks like step by step?
Yeah.
And where financial independence sits within that hierarchy.
Yeah, sure. So that pyramid or hierarchy of needs is something that doesn't come from me, obviously, but
is that the Maslow? Is that similar to Maslow's
yeah,
hierarchy of needs?
That's where it starts.
Yeah, sure.
And I've sort of created my own little version of it.
Cool.
And it's work in progress. And so I'd like to get your feedback as well if we have the chance to talk about that. But it's basically looking at the realizing that we need to fulfill the main basic needs, and these are food, shelter, air, rest, security, safety. These are probably the second level, but also love and belonging, family, friends, being part of a group, community, etc. These are sort of the main things that as Western expats we normally have it simply because it's been given to us by our parents and the environment in which we grew up, so we take it as a given, but it's still something to recognize. And then there's self-esteem, which most of us professionals that are achieving something already are pretty good with that as well. And then there's self-actualization, and I've added a few. There's a couple of other levels there.
What have you added?
Cognitive, I think, and aesthetic. It comes from a different model. But it fits quite well there. I'm not really sure how to play with those yet. But what's really important is that to get to self-actualization, or to be able to get to doing something that's bigger than yourself, I think you need to have a certain level of comfort or a certain level of fulfillment in those basic needs. And the reason we're talking here today, it's because those needs are met in one way or another to a certain level, and it helps us do that, right? Having conversations, interesting conversations, and you guys helping the community. It means we're already there in the self-actualization piece, working on that, and I think that's what
looking for the next step. So basically, just to recap, the first stage is really about your physical needs, and then the second stage are your emotional needs, like building community and love and trust and all of those things. And then it's the altruistic, what are you going to do with your life? How are you going to find meaning? And those.
That's right.
Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah. So I think on my pyramid is 7 levels, but if you simplify them, it's something like that. And so the highest level is really, self-actualization, transcendence, which I don't really know what it means, but it's up there. It's something to explore. And then, to come back to those elements, the foundational elements, the main needs. I see, food, shelter, and security, safety. These are key things. I also see physical fitness as a core part of those needs. Maybe as a second level. Right? Once you've secured food and housing, and you're safe and secure, you're not living in fear all the time. You can start taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
That is your physical health, but also your mental health. And then you can take care of your finances, because that takes care of the rest, right? So that's how I see.
So you put physical fitness and finance on the same level?
Yes. Yeah. And finance is it kind of comes across, but so does physical fitness.
Of course, fitness. I think because both of them, there was a really interesting analogy that Andrew said to us a few weeks back about when you're looking after your finances and when you're developing this financial independence model, you're really looking after the 80-year-old version of you. And when you're looking after your health and fitness as well, you're also doing the same. You're looking after the version of you that's 60, that doesn't want to have arthritis, that wants to be really mobile, that wants to play with your kids, that doesn't want to be overweight. So as much as you're looking after the person that's here and now, it's also a very futuristic, I'm looking after the me of tomorrow. So I think both of those tie in quite well, because you are looking after the financial version of you that in 60 years' time doesn't want to be sitting on the poverty line, or doesn't want to be like millions and millions of people who retire and they have nothing. And same thing with the health version of you. And when we look at the health statistics of today, it's just astounding. Most people end up with some form of non-communicable disease, whether that's like heart disease or whether it's some cardiovascular problem. So to be able to think about those things now, I'm going to look after the me now so that I don't get sick, or so that I do have some financial independence in my future.
There's also that same thing about most older people. I don't know what the stat is, but I was chatting to one of my colleagues during the week. He wasn't quite sure on it, but he was estimating about 60% of people in the US don't have money to deal with some sort of crisis or some sort of financial surprise element in their life. I
listened to a statistic the other day, and it was saying that the majority of the people within the US cannot get $5,000 if something happens. They don't have the means to take out $5,000. And what's really interesting as well, I listened to this other statistic, and I know that this is relevant for women, but it was saying basically that 70% of women, when they get to retirement age, have nothing, as opposed to their counterparts, men, who in a very different statistical kind of field, a lot more men end up with at retirement with something, and the majority of women don't. So for me as a woman, it's almost like a slap in the face. Like, I need to think about this stuff now. Otherwise you're going to end up being a statistic. And that's scary, particularly with where everything is today.
Yeah, totally. And you've touched on quite a few things there. And two aspects that really speak to me is taking care of your future self. That's such a good way of looking at it, and both physically and financially, but I think also mentally and emotionally. These are really important aspects of you, but in the future, and that needs to be taken care of right now. And again, I put them together because I see them as core part of how we can be better and then find fulfillment in the long run, right? But we need to get the foundation right, and looking at the far future and saying, this is me, in a few decades, and that's the guy I'm taking care of right now. And I think that's really powerful. And the other aspect is the role of women in this. And I think we just need more female voices to
it's scary.
Female role models. But in investing, one example is in investing, women tend to be a lot better than men. It's just that I think fewer of them are actually investing. But once they are, they tend to be better because they just stick to the plan. They're better at sticking to the plan.
Yeah, I read
whereas
the same
guys
thing.
are
Guys are egotistical.
Ooh, I know better,
Macho.
right.
Yeah, I'll play this game. I'll beat the game. Whereas women just do what they're instructed to do. They understand it. They know what they're doing. They understand the plan, and they stay the course.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate this is, and I think we're probably digressing a little bit, but I think, and again, I don't know how accurate this is, but this is my sentiment to this. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for women over the last, like, society's changed massively. In the last, 10, 20, 30 years, things have changed so much. And I remember my mum, and this has never left me, but I remember my mum telling me that when she grew up, her family used to sit by the radio and listen to the radio. And then we fast forward to when I was growing up and we used to sit by the TV. And then you fast forward and now people are talking to their homes and are always on their phone, and your phone is the smartest thing in the world. It does everything for you. Everything. You can transfer money, you can take out money, you can pay for things, you can have things delivered. We don't even need to leave. And in talking just about women in particular, I think our roles have changed a lot. So when my mum was growing up, the thing that you did as a woman is you got married and somebody else looked after you. And that was it. And that was all that you thought about, because you thought about, oh, I'm going to have a part-time job and I'm going to raise my kids. And in my generation, things have changed massively. Women are now okay, well, you don't have to do that. You can have a job, or you can raise kids, or you can do both. And at the same time, this whole thing of you don't have someone that looks after you anymore. You look after yourself. And you can live with somebody and have this amazing partnership with them, but at the same time, you're also an individual, and that never used to really exist for women in the past. And I feel like this huge change is also spurred on this thing where women are now coming to a point where they're like, okay, I have a family, I have a husband, I have this, but I also have me as an individual and the person that I'm looking after as well. And that's a huge responsibility to have your eyes open to. And I feel like that's happened to me recently, and I can see it happening to so many of my friends that have kids and have families, but are also wanting to be financially independent, separate to their spouse, and also separate to their family too, because at the end of the day, although we walk into everything with this idea of everyone's going to live happily ever after, that those things don't always happen. And again, when I look at those statistics of the US, about 70% of women getting to retirement age are not having a cent. It's mind-blowing, and it's also an indication that there's a lot of women that haven't opened their eyes to that, haven't opened their eyes to, okay, well, you have to look after your family, your spouse, and create this beautiful relationship, but at the same time, you also have to be financially independent. What do you guys think? Am I wrong?
No. I think it's it goes back to, you can relate it back to the hierarchy of needs, that there's one way of looking at things where you need to have the bottom tier, your shelter, your health, your water, your air, your food, and you can have that as part of a team. You can have that as part of a family structure where there's one person looking after one role, there's another person looking after the other role, but you both share the benefits. Mm-hmm. But then what happens if something happens to one of the people and the skill set's not there for the other person to raise the family or to keep the financial independence?
However, what I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you, is that for men, I think that's always been in your framework. Men have always had that in their framework, and so it's not something that you need to learn or open your eyes to, whereas for women it hasn't really always been there for us. So it's something that we're waking up to.
Culturally, not just in many cultures, the women don't have to think about that, because even, I know you're talking about in the past that's how it was, but there's also still right now lots of women still in that environment where they are doing the kids thing because they want to do it. That's what they've chosen. But
and also their culture is telling them to.
Yeah, and
culturally, there's no other choice for them.
For some,
you are the responsibility of your husband, and if he lets you work, then you work. And I know that sounds really harsh to say, but it is the reality of a lot of women. There's a lot of women that I know that don't work because their husbands don't let them. And so it's quite interesting. Sorry, I digressed a lot.
No, your point is very valid, because that's where people need to think about the future, whether they're full course 100% flat out on the financial investment track or 5%. At least they're doing something so that there's a plan B if something goes wrong in 5, 10, 15 years, that they're not suddenly caught out.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you found you lost so much money even in the game, you know, even doing the thing. You know, how much can you lose when you realize you've been absent and you've just lost all that time?
Yeah,
So,
and I think more and more women are taking back control of their lives, right? And so there's, as you said, there's a very fast evolution taking place. So transformation, right? The culture is changing very fast. The expectations are changing, and I think for women, there's that double burden of you're still expected to do everything that you used to do, right? Taking care of the family and being there, and taking care of the household, etc. Actually taking care of the family's health too, right? So we're saying there's different pillars with different responsibilities. Typically women live longer because they take care of themselves better, and they take care of everyone's health, and then the finances, or maybe the earning part, is more from the men. But I think all of that is changing, and what's might be difficult is that women are still expected to do what they used to do, and then on top of that, take care of themselves, be successful at work, etc., etc. So I think it's tough. It's a difficult time, but it's an important time.
And be financially independent when potentially you're out of the field of working for like 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting thing that's happening to women, I think. I have no idea what the solution is or any of that, but at least like opening your eyes to it is a really interesting thing for me personally. Anyway, I don't know if I've shed light for that for you guys, but what's interesting about that too is also what we were discussing before is, okay, so when you do get there, what the hell is the point of all of that? So maybe you can,
I think there's even more, I don't know if it's more, but there's a very strong reason for a woman to try to reach a certain level of financial independence early, and that is to be able to take care and be there for the kids, right? If that's part of the plan, I think it's quite powerful. For me, it was a big motivation. At least it's something that I really value, is the time I'll be able to spend with my kids. And now one for now, but we'll see how many later. But I think it doesn't even have to be reaching financial independence, that big number that sometimes talking about 25 times your expected expenses or 30 times or whatever it is. It's really as you progress on the financial journey, as you build safety, really as you consolidate those foundations, you basically have more safety and you can be more confident. You can take choices every time more independently from financial constraints. What I mean by that is, for example, a young woman, gets pregnant, and her and her husband decide that it's important to spend time with the baby, and maybe they're not all the way to FI, and it's typically not the case, that early. But if they have enough savings, they can make decisions that are the best for themselves, without having to just go back to work as soon as the boss tells them to, and be constrained by the number of weeks of maternity or paternity leave they have. And
that
one
was
of them can take
interesting,
leave,
right?
Take leave for a few months or even a few years. Some people can't afford a few years of part-time or something, but it's really empowering to have some savings and investment working for you, because you can
and
take
choice. It gives you choices.
Yeah.
Well, what's really interesting about what you said is that we're almost both going through this paradigm shift. Is when you were discussing about just about to have a baby and not needing to work, so you were on paternity leave essentially, and not having 2 weeks. And what's really interesting is that, say, I'm opening my eyes to becoming like financially independent, and you're like, oh, paternity leave, like I want to spend time with my baby. So it's such a different, like, does that make sense?
Yeah,
just a different mindset.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you've got to do one step at a time, don't you? Like, it doesn't just happen overnight. You've done very well with the time span that you've had, but the people that we've spoken to so far is like, it's a long-term plan. It's stay the course. So I think you have to think about it, and maybe women have to think about it a bit more, start to shift and start to factor it in the back of their mind.
Yeah, but what's interesting is it gives both genders the ability to have different choices, and that's the important thing, that you're going down this route so that you as a male can take as much time off when you have a baby, and for me as a female, that I don't get to like retirement age and become a part of that statistic, that's 70%.
Yeah. I imagine when you are doing it, you have different motivations at different stages of your life. So at the beginning now, for me, my motivation for saving was so that I have a buffer if something goes wrong. That was like I wasn't thinking about paternity leave or 75 years old. Just a case of, I need to have a safety net if something goes wrong. Right. That's the first and foremost thing. So that's my like security there.
Yeah, then that's
and then the next step, and then the next step, and I imagine the thought process will evolve and change, and you'll have different motivations, and you'll want to spend your money on different things.
And I think it also, so for me, when we have this discussion, it really solidifies the fact that what financial independence does, is it gives you the ability to make the right choices for who you are as an individual, as opposed to the choices that you feel you need to make because of the responsibilities that you have in your life. And that might be paying rent, paying bills, or living up to other people's expectations or society expectations, that you have the ability to make the choices for you. And that's really powerful.
And that's... these are really important aspects of it. I think, what society is expecting of you is probably the one of the biggest enemy of financial independence. Because the first thing that someone could criticize about what I'm doing is, so now what, you retired and you're not going to do anything for society, and what you're going to do? What do you mean you don't work? Right? There's a lot of criticism up front before we have this kind of discussion. It's very much like that. And there was another point, but I guess I'll come to it later.
No, it's okay.
And I just can't remember it.
Oh. Do you know, when we met, we were both talking about the intellectual dark web. So I started doing loads of research. I went down a rabbit hole on the intellectual dark web. And it got me thinking a lot about
Do you want to just explain?
Oh, well, you can explain it a little bit more.
Are you talking about the guys...
Yeah, like Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris.
Brett Weinstein, all those guys. Yeah.
That's basically a bunch of people having open and honest discussions.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson as well. So for anybody who doesn't know, there's a they've coined the phrase themselves as a joke. It's not it's not their actual like team name. They're just a group of intellectuals that have come through university professorships, and they've just started conversations through their podcasts. You can search any of the names and you'll start to tap into these guys. They have a very intelligent outlook. They all share different opinions, but what they do is they discuss them, and they can disagree calmly and politely, and they can move on. They can find the common ground, and they can find where they disagree. That was just a quick explanation for anybody who doesn't know what that is.
And it is a rabbit hole if you start, because they speak about really interesting aspects and topics.
Yeah. Well, so that was one of the things that I was thinking about is, okay, so when you guys had that Simply FI kind of meetup, I also met this other woman, and she was talking about all of these altruistic legal things that are existing at the moment and I won't go into depth with that, but into what she wanted to do progressing and moving forward is to really get involved in making the world a better place, and
you're
actually
gonna have to introduce her to me. I'm
contributing to society and thinking about some of the really, really big issues that are existing and that are currently happening. So they kind of coincide together with, okay, so now I get to this place in my life where I'm financially independent, and I may choose to chill by the pool all day, or to go and travel, or to go and buy a nice car, or all of those things. Or I can also have the option to find some more meaning in my life and contribute to society in a I can never say this word, philanthropic.
Yeah.
Is that what?
Yeah, philanthropic. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
No, I was going to say. I think what the thought you just triggered in my mind is those kind of goals in your life. Like, it's similar in fitness, but those kind of goals. It's not just I want to have 100,000 in my bank, like that kind of not short-sighted goal, but that medium-term side. Like, okay, $100,000 or whatever. That's my goal. That's focused. That's powerful in a sense. But if your goal is so much more than that, then you listen to people online, you meet people, and you see people, and you start to get a sense that anything is possible. So why don't I set my standards at, boom, I want to change the world. I want to find a way where I can, like Akon is feeding hundreds of thousands of people every year, you know. So he's a pop star, he's famous, but he's got all this going on, and he's giving electricity.
Same thing with Tony Robbins. He
sorry, that's a good one as well. Yeah,
he feeds like half the world as well.
Yeah.
And I know the Bill Gates Foundation, they do a lot for water and sanitation, and
that's even a bigger, I think, a very different level.
But I think if you, let's say you sat down quietly to yourself and you said, I want to be that, then the expense you have coming up this weekend is completely irrelevant. The little savings goal you have is irrelevant because you need to go way beyond that. So I have a client in the gym who's extremely overweight, and she's lost all the weight in the past, busted her ankle, piled it all back on, and she's looking at little weight goals and stuff. And I'm like, okay, hold on, let's try and change this. I want you to write down a list of all the things that you think you can't do. If it's run a marathon, if it's whatever, climb a mountain, and this is going to be the goal. These are the things that are going to get you out of bed in the morning. These, like, you want to climb Kilimanjaro. So the weight is only a small part of what we're trying to do. Yeah. It's not focused on the weight, because that can get difficult and that gets depressing, and then you stay in bed, and then you just have a meal. All right, no. We're going. She wrote down on one of them bungee jumping. So I was like, okay, awesome, I love that. So now, if you want to ever do a bungee jump, we need to go. Everything needs to go.
Yeah. Because if you focus on the negative aspects, right, of the story, which is here losing weight, then it's not really motivating. Whereas if you know why you're doing it, and what's the bigger purpose, it gives and that helps you dream about it. That gives you motivation intrinsically. That's
that
very
fire
powerful
inside you. It's not just about me looking good in the mirror, or it's not just me about having a savings that I can buy a better car. It's like, I want to get a job with this charity in this country, and I want to change all of these things.
So, Sebastien, I have a question for you. So, as someone who's developed Simply FI, you started this group. You're 33 years old, and you're like financially independent and kind of retired. Like, that's ridiculous. So what are you going to do with your life? What's going to bring you meaning? Where are you going next? Because the reason I ask this is not to pry, but it's I'm sure a lot of people listening are going to look to you and be like, okay, I want to do that. I want to get to a place where I can do whatever I want with my life. So maybe you can inspire people with what you're going to do next.
Okay. Well, I have a few ideas. I don't know if that's what I'm going to be doing really, but so first I'm going to take care of my baby and spend good time with my wife and my parents. We've been away for a while, so reconnecting really closely with them, being able to spend quality time, with my dad and my mom. And it's not about sitting down for coffee. It's about just being with them and doing whatever they're doing with them, and knowing them for real. And then do that with within my own little family, with my wife and my baby. So I would say these are strong ones that speak to most people. Really working on those relationships, because in the end, that's something that matters a lot. maybe the thing that matters the most for some people.
Yeah, sure.
And then there's more than that. As you said, there's a bit of a sense of responsibility. In my case, because it's such a unique position, there's that. But there's also a bit of sometimes I think that I'm in the position I'm in, not only because I deserve it. There's a lot of external factors that influence me to help me get to where I am today. And I don't know if I did that much hard work on top of it, right? I work hard, yes, but there's a lot of reasons why I do work hard. It's probably because I had all of these positive inputs in my life, caring parents, a good school, people that encouraged me to do the things that in the end I ended up doing, and discussions with friends that helped me, that triggered me into researching certain topics and exploring different things in my life, and building all of this stuff, and being here today. It's not me looking to share this. It's just you telling me that, hey, let's talk about this stuff. And I think a lot of things in life happen like that for most people, and including me. So being in the position I am in today, I think a big part of that is also luck. Maybe all of it, if you really push deep into this, and that's a whole different rabbit hole. But Yuval Noah Harari speaks about this a little bit in his second book. But so that's one aspect. The other aspect is simply very selfish, like what makes me feel good, and I think via Simplify and helping those people, I realize that is something that gives me meaning, without it having to be a paid thing, right? And so some of the members are asking me and the other organizers, why are you guys doing this? Like, you're not getting paid, what you're getting out of it? I think it's that selfish feeling of feeling good because we're helping, and there's also that part of being recognized for it. It would be different, I think, if it was all completely anonymous, slightly. But the fact that we're helping for free and that's recognized, I think helps. It makes me feel very good. So that gives me an idea that doing things for others is probably what will help me feel best. And that's, again, it's a huge. There's many options there. And
that's big too, because you're influencing other people and influencing how they look at their lives and what they do next. It's big. It's really big.
And I'm lucky that I came across. Again, it's luck, because it came to me in a way because I'm interested, but even my interest comes from some other external. Anyway, we don't have to go that way again. I came across effective altruism as a movement. And that's something very powerful in my opinion. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, can you explain to everyone what that is?
So effective altruism is basically a philosophy or a movement that is looking at how to do good in the most effective way. So using science, reasoning, and evidence, it's about looking at how we can make the world better using the resources we have, the time we have, in the most efficient way. Also the skills we have, right? So as individuals, it's about, for some young people, it's about choosing the right career. So when young students don't know where to go next, but they already have figured that the best, one of the main criteria would be to help make the world a better place. Then effective altruism can help them do that. There's a lot of research on the topics and the different careers they can take, and how to really contribute. And that could be by taking a PhD in a very specific topic that will help solve big problems in medicine or in computer engineering and machine learning, etc. Or it could be by working in a specific charity or foundation or some philanthropic organization. It also helps people like you and me make better decisions, because they have a very interesting way of a framework for decision making for people who want to do good in their life. To take better, give direction to our life.
Can you touch on that little framework? Like, what kind of things are people thinking?
What they use to evaluate what best career would be for an individual is something we can use also as individuals who are already in a career to decide which way to go. And that framework helps because it looks at different aspects or criteria to basically rate or assess an option. So you can have a lot of different options of what to do next. And so in my case, there's a lot of different options there. And effective altruism says, well, if you want to have a positive impact, you need to go first for scale. It needs to be something that can scale and have positive impact. So you look at the numbers. Then it has to be something that's fairly neglected, where there's not that much effort or resources already allocated, because as an individual, that's where you're going to make the biggest difference. If you're just a drop in the ocean, it might be good and positive, but maybe that drop, if you put it in a glass, which is, say, another activity, there you make a real difference, or a bigger difference, relatively to the rest. Then there's personal fit, and there was one more, tractability, how much that activity actually solves the problem. So one example is, I used to be a consultant in climate change for energy management, sustainability. Ultimately, it was about mitigating the effect of climate change or trying to delay climate change, basically. And in that field, it's not neglected because there's a lot of resources going in. Scale is massive, right? Because we're talking about the globe, and so every little improvement will potentially saves thousands, if not millions of lives later, right, in the future. So it really is taking care of the whole planet. So that's really important, but it's not neglected. And tractability, how much of each increment of effort and resources that we put in there really turns into
say reduced carbon emissions or
and
something like that.
And that is something that still also can be debated. So I was talking about those three axes and how it helped me basically assess what I used to do. And as an individual, while my contribution in that activity was positive, it's also something that someone else could be doing. And there's only a limited impact as an individual. Whereas if I was to work in a different field, and let's say mitigation of the risk of nuclear warfare, right, which is something that's neglected today simply because people think it's something of the past, but it's real. And there's a number of other global threats that don't have enough attention or are not getting enough resources. And so if I was to spend my time there, my personal contribution would be much higher. And so that's one way effective altruism helps individual guide where to go. But it doesn't have to be that extreme. It can be in my own field, say Simplify. So until now, we've been doing mostly face-to-face presentations and meetups. And these are very powerful because people are there in person and we help them and we teach them one-to-one or in groups, etc. And we make progress. But then is there a better way to scale that? Yes, there is, right? Are we really making a difference? To a certain extent. Is it neglected? Yes, it's massively neglected. So we can again look at those three axes and say, okay, how can I improve on each of those three? And so that's a continuous process that we can all apply to whatever we're doing when we have a mission, like looking at those axes. And finally, in effective altruism, there's also a big thing around charitable donation, right? Also being able to do the right thing, but also making sure that every dollar that you give actually provides benefits that are tangible and efficient. And the sad truth is that the majority of charities don't deliver that much value. Not so much because it goes into overheads, but simply because the project itself, it might not be the most efficient way of making the world a better place. Now, one quick example, and it's a traditional example here. It takes about $30,000 to $40,000 to train a dog that helps the blind walk in the West. So say in the UK or in Belgium, whatever. But it takes maybe $100 to cure a kid in Africa of blindness. Right. So you're talking about the same cause, blindness, and trying to help the world in that direction. And you can literally help tens and hundreds of people with the same amount of money than if you had put that money into training one dog that will help one blind person. Cure. Right? And it's not that one cause is more important than the other. It's just that there's a more effective way of helping humankind. Yeah. And that is
one is prevention
question.
And then one is like management, really.
No, one is curing blindness, so it's proper real change on somebody's life. And the other one is helping someone who has blindness that for whatever reason can't be cured. So it's really about comparing the options you have with your resources. So time, money in the case of charitable donation, but so that's something that's helping me now think about the future and how to spend my time, my resources, and my charity donations are also now guided by a framework like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, go on.
I was going to say, and this is effective altruism is all about really bringing meaning into your life, and the meaning comes from helping others, and from helping others essentially.
I think it helps. Since at some point I realized that helping others was something that was bringing me meaning, then the next question is like, how can I do that better? And it's a bit of a tricky thing because the reason why it brings me meaning is because it suits my ego a bit, right? I'm helping others. I'm a good person. I'm recognized for it. But the problem is that in doing good, that is what drives most people's actions, and that's why we have ineffective altruism. And it's not like training that dog is ineffective. Well, it is ineffective as opposed to saving those kids from blindness. But there's a lot of sort of altruism that actually does bad things.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of example of charities that just don't help make the world a better place. But money goes there. Why? Because then someone can say, I've donated for that cause. And there's a lot of ego boosting messaging around those things. And that is, in my opinion, not bad because it enables to gather fund and to do something good. But it's a shame that it's not used more efficiently because you could be having, 1,000 times bigger impact, maybe 1 million times. I mean, in some cases, if you go from negative impact to positive, that would be already good.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because I was talking to somebody recently, and this is a common thing where people leave, say, their white collar corporate job, and then because they're sick of working at a desk, they want to go into helping people, so they quit and they jump into the fitness industry, whether they become a class instructor or a trainer, and because that's them helping people.
Yeah.
But what you're describing now is a much more effective altruistic way of helping people if they were to maybe steer those goals, possibly take the money that they're earning in their white collar job, in their high paid corporate job, and then do something like you're describing with it, rather than actually taking their time and spending their time on a 1-to-1 or on a 1-to-10 basis helping people.
Yeah,
It's
I think
a
it
very
depends
important
on
question.
your interests,
Mhm.
though.
Yeah.
So you want to funnel your interests and this
Get the balance,
effective,
Yeah.
effective altruism together. So you mesh. What am I interested in? What gives me meaning? And then how
Take
do
care of yourself. Take care of foundation, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
So if you can't align what you're doing, then you probably won't do it that much. So, I mean, the example you gave is typical. Say the highly paid banker that goes and work for charity in the field. Well, with his salary, he could pay for 10 or 20 salaries of someone, more able to actually do that work. But maybe that gives him meaning, and he wouldn't donate if it wasn't for that meaning that helps him do that. So there's a very important component of personal fit.
Yeah.
But it's good to, and this personal fit is obviously linked to the ego, but it's an important part. So it's about understanding that. And effective altruism is really saying, look, if you can put your ego aside a little bit, think of what else you can be doing. And there's some of those things, in some of those options, a lot of those options are things that we wouldn't think of naturally, but actually fit us quite well. But I think what's really interesting is to be able to trigger the conversation. And open our horizons to more options and to more ways of doing good if that's what we really want. Because otherwise, maybe staying in the job and donating the difference would be what works best. But a lot of people say they're going to do that, and then they don't donate, or they do it once, and then the value drifts because you change your mind and you say, oh, now I have some other projects with my money. And then you don't do good. So maybe doing that might be the best way to actually contribute to a better society.
What I was going to say to you just then is that I think sometimes those things are linked to what makes you come alive as well, because it's very easy to donate your salary when you're in a very high paid position, but at the same time, you as an individual, it's a slow death. Do you know? So leaving that and then going into a different field makes you come alive as an individual. And I think that's really important, because I know that those things are they resonate very much with me. I remember doing an internship in BRAC, and BRAC was at the time one of the largest NGOs in the world, and they're based in Bangladesh, but no one's heard of them because they don't hire people from outside. In every local community that they're in, they hire people within those communities because they're cheaper and they don't have to pay for security, and they know the country and they know the language and they know everything about that community. But going there as an outsider makes you feel like you're a part of something and you're doing something meaningful, and makes you as an individual come alive, so you care more for that project. So it's that how do you come alive as an individual, but then how do also you channel what you're doing in a positive way that's a lot more effective.
And it builds your empathy, right? And maybe it builds a side of you that can be used later for something bigger, right? So that we all have a unique journey, and I think, that experience probably helped you do more, right? Just having been there and having seen it. Whereas if you were just in an office donating and maybe helping 10 people do what you did, it wouldn't have that impact, and it wouldn't give you that meaning later. So no, it's important to also have hands-on And
So
that's
then-
one of my questions is how much hands-on do I want to be, right?
Yeah.
Because I could go back to a consulting job and keep making money and donate that. That might be one way for me.
Yeah.
But I'm obviously
But that's not going to give you
saying
that
no to that
hierarchy
right now.
of needs. It's not going to tick that happiness box on that pyramid of
it
of
could,
needs.
from a purely ethical, emotionless almost perspective.
Yeah, if you're very analytical, then
Yeah.
you can
It's
see
a-
the pros
look,
and
I've,
cons to that.
I've helped, I don't know, save 100 children this year, and so that's probably more than what I would have been able to do on my own.
Yeah.
Say, any other activity potentially. But it takes a lot of effort to really internalize it as a positive emotion as well.
Yeah.
So as much
It has
as
to
helping
outweigh
directly.
the stress you're getting from your boss and the stress you're getting from your deadlines
Mm.
and the stress you're getting from not being able to see your kids and your wife. So,
Yeah.
So I guess the next question there is, okay, how do you figure out what makes you come alive and do that in an effective altruistic way where you're actually putting your resources into something that is actually scalable and making a difference, and at the same time also making you as an individual feel good and give your life meaning and purpose, right?
Exactly.
How?
Yeah. But that's probably one of the most important questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm right there in the middle of that right now.
Mm. And how are you figuring that out? What tools are you using to be able to get to those questions and then be able to find resolutions and answers to those?
So as I said earlier, effective altruism gives good guidance for that, some sort of a framework. I think what's also important is to just go out there and look at what's possible. There's a lot more things that we don't know about that than what we think we know about, right? So just, speaking with you guys is me exploring the world and the alternatives. And I'm blessed that I have the time to have meaningful discussions now with lots of people from different industries and background and understanding what's possible, what are the needs, etc. And then it's about combining what gives me meaning personally, or where there's a personal fit, with some bigger ideas, or some bigger purpose or sense of ethics. And so in my case, I think because of my background in personal finance, it will probably be around that space, with the group, maybe beyond the group on some other platforms, and towards that effective altruism aspect. I think, one thing that I'm realizing is if I could help a few more of those people who are reaching a certain level of financial independence to think about things that are a bit more altruistic, right? Not just me saving for my own comfort and then taking holidays on cruise every other month and whatever, and spending it all because I deserve it. If I can inspire some people to think more in terms of in altruistic terms, first is I'm very happy to help them get to whatever financial independence they want to reach, and two, I think then we can have a bigger impact, as opposed to just me maybe continuing working and donating that difference. So I'm looking at that now as combining the two, how to build on those foundations. That's including physical fitness and health and nutrition and mental health and meditation and all of that. Building on those things so that we can go and do something bigger than ourselves. I think these are all the elements I'm playing with at the moment.
They're all really important topics.
Awesome.
Sebastien, thank you so much for the amazing discussion today. It's lots of food for thought and lots for everyone to think about, and maybe once they get financially independent and financially, I like the financially fit, and then actually fit, physically. People can
really
start exploring these topics and these ideas. So if people wanted to get a hold of you, sorry, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say it could be a reason why people would want to get financially independent. Maybe you didn't think about it in this light, in this kind of spotlight before, that actually if you can do that, you can help more people. So if you're a PT, yoga instructor, or Pilates instructor, and you're helping a class of 20 people 7 hours a day, put some money aside, start saving, and start building something bigger and better, and really go full on with it. Yeah, no, that's very powerful. Yeah, it really goes together. Being more financially fit helps you be more physically fit, and vice versa. It's really these are just building blocks of everyone's lives, and
and they help each
Yeah.
other. Yeah.
So where can people get in touch with you and find you online? Do you have any social media pages or Facebook pages that you want to share with people?
So the easiest is Facebook, but that's just looking for my name and getting in touch directly. We are obviously on the SimpliFi Facebook group.
Spell your name again for us, if you don't mind, so people can type it in, because I know we don't know how to spell it.
Sebastien Aguilar. Spelling would be long, but Sebastien. That's French spelling.
Sure.
Aguilar, Aguilar.
Cool.
I think if it's about financial independence, then simplifi.org or the SimpliFi Common Sense Personal Finance and Investing Facebook group are good places. And then if it's anything to do with effective altruism, just type effective altruism. There's a million things here. I'm also running the local group of effective altruism, so that's another place.
On Facebook as well.
There's a Facebook group for the Middle East, for the UAE. I'm considering starting maybe a blog or something, but it's not there yet.
For sure.
It's not there yet.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. You speak very well. You have a lot to share. People would definitely tune into that.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
And what I noticed, because we both joined, you joined, right? The Facebook group?
The SimpliFi?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you guys are really active on it, and lots of people ask lots of questions, and I noticed that you guys are always there to respond and help people out, which is really nice to see. It's good. Anyway, Sebastien, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Yeah. And see you guys next week.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
See you, bye.